Well, it doesn't really help me, but I just really enjoy looking at go up sometimes. At some point I just stopped buying them because there was just so many of them and they still what the hell did I miss? You know, what happened between 2000 and 2015 exactly? Can someone please tell me? Greetings and salutations, my name is Orcult and welcome to my sanctuary. To those of you new here, you're very, very welcome. And I hope you stick around and subscribe to this channel. And to those of you who are returning subscribers, thank you so much for all your support. And if you're returning and not yet subscribing, please consider subscribing because it really helps me. Well, it doesn't really help me, but I just really enjoy looking at go up sometimes. So today is going to be a slightly different video. We're going to be talking about a somewhat controversial topic, which I thought I'd cover because, well, let's face it, the subscriber count is kind of going up, but it's doing it very slowly, so I thought, well, what do I have to lose? Either this goes big, or it doesn't go anywhere at all, and, you know, the worst thing that can happen is I lose some. No guts, no glory. So I sort of apologize for the clickbaity title, but not really. What I really want to talk about, like in more detail what the hell I mean by this topic, is I want to talk about how the darker side of fashion and its sort of visuals changed over the years since I joined the dark side back in my early teens. It seems to me that the darker side of fashion and, you know, music and everything that surrounds it and the visuals behind it is getting sort of darker and more extreme and daring, and I just wanted to talk about how I, from my experience, saw it evolve. So to begin with, I think even when things like Black Sabbath appeared, that was considered diabolical and scary and, you know, no-go for most people in the mainstream. But, you know, now that seems pretty much like kindergarten. So now everything seems to be quite tame that somewhat has hit the mainstream in the rock world. For example, you have Alice Cooper and Danzig and, you know, Rob Zombie even, well, not talking about his films, but just the general imagery. That used to be considered, you know, they were called shock rockers and things like that, and now you listen to it and it all seems quite tame. And setting apart the rock part of it, if we just go into goth, I don't even remember seeing any of the symbols you see in goth now. You mainly saw things like crosses and bats and ravens and the occasional ankh, however you pronounce it, you know, the Egyptian sort of cross, and you saw imagery like that. And then all of a sudden, there was this huge change. When I really started going into this sort of fashion and culture and music, it was back in the 90s. And frankly, goth back then looked like more post-punk traditional goth or, you know, Victorian vampy kind of goth. And it didn't have this new witchy kind of stuff, really. Witchy back then used to look like maybe very kind of boho with the Indian sort of skirts, and it was more Stevie Nicks rather than what it turned to now with brands like Killstar. Pentagrams and things like that were mostly encountered, I guess, in the world of metal, where you had bands ranging from, say, Motley Crue to Anthrax and Slayer, and, you know, the harder stuff like Venom and Emperor having pentagrams on their albums and on their merch and things like that. But in general, I thought goth was nowhere even near that, and even in metal, it wasn't as, I guess, prominent back then, and, you know, I think mostly metal was more about sex, drugs, and rock and roll back in the day, and you wouldn't see these things unless it was just for the shock value of it. For me personally, the first time I saw something like that, like really in-your-face kind of imagery, was when Manson released Antichrist Superstar in 1996, and that was just a huge revolution, and it actually really hit the mainstream. I was absolutely in love with that album, and I loved the whole concept of it and the imagery behind it, and I was a huge Manson fan back in the day of that album, and I think I didn't really go as far as maybe 2 albums into it after that, but and it kind of, I think, just faded out and became more and more pop, really. But back in the day, I was just so into it. I had all the posters. My parents absolutely hated him. You know, they were probably wishing I'd go back to my, you know, Guns N' Roses, Metallicas, and all the sort of hard rock I was listening to before that. But unfortunately, that ship has sailed. And I was then also into a lot of the vampire stuff, like I was reading Dracula and Anne Rice, and that kind of blended in for me into this sort of the first probably interest with all these kind of occult horror things. And I'm not a huge horror fan, but I really like the vampires for mainly the romanticism behind these films and books. So I got to see Marilyn Manson in 1997, and I bought this shirt. What does it say there? There it says no forgiveness. And I think there it must say no salvation. Yep, there it is. So I really loved, predominantly I actually loved the colors on it more than anything. But this is probably the only thing that I had that had this sort of, you know, very diabolical thing on it. And I used to love this a lot, like I wore it all the time, and I actually wore it, we had this school trip to Paris when I was, you know, 17 or something like that, because I was in London and we went to Paris, and I walked into the Notre Dame wearing this, and I thought I was super edgy and cool. But it was more back then, you didn't see things like this a lot, so it was kind of like really a statement, I would say. So I don't actually wear this anymore, I've given it to the man. I did find a dress with the same kind of print by Killstar with their Manson, I think, collab, and I actually bought that just as a memento of that. I don't think I'll wear it, probably, because I don't wear a lot of like Baphomet kind of symbols, and I wear tiny pentagrams, but I don't go like huge on them or anything like that. Basically, after the 90s, at some point I went to uni, and there I kind of lost my style entirely. Like, I still listen to a lot of music, but I listened to a lot of different music, which was like, I don't know, ranging from metal to trip-hop, and I don't know, I just didn't go to a lot of things. I didn't wear a lot of shirts, I didn't wear anything goth at all anymore, I didn't wear even metal stuff, and I was just like completely lost. And I think after I really sort of met the man, and back in like when our first trial decided that it was going to be born, we kind of sort of, I started going back to the style and everything, so that was around 2015-16, and then I, you know, discovered Killstar and all these other brands, and man, that was a bit of a shocker, because I was absent in this for about, you know, probably over a decade. I was absent in this sort of fashion and style and stuff, and the imagery has changed completely. So there were still things like skulls and bats and crosses and ankhs, but like the predominance of sigils and baphomets and reversed pentagrams and inverted crosses, it's just like overwhelming sometimes, especially when you have brands like Blackcraft Cult, which is entirely pretty much around, I mean, the stuff from, I think, the Satanic Temple or something like that, which only has imagery with relation, I guess, to things like that, which is quite, like, overpowering with that particular brand. But even when you go to other brands like Creepsville and Too Fast, which were, like, always more, I thought, on the milder side, and suddenly they have all this stuff, and they have little Baphomets and things like that, and there's just a lot of it going on. And I was like, what the hell did I miss? You know, what happened between 2000 and 2015 exactly? Can someone please tell me? Because I have absolutely no idea. Like, it was so different, and is so different now, that I don't quite know what to make of it. Now, to begin with, I did buy the initial Dark Lord creature from Killstar. I called it Ozzy. I have a creature video, I'll link it up here, with most of my collection, and that has like a ton of these Dark Lords. But at some point I just stopped buying them because there was just so many of them, and there's just more and more of them coming out, and it's just like, there's too many of them, okay? I think I used to like these things more when they were a bit of a taboo and a bit of a statement, but now it seems to be almost expected that you should have these things. And that kind of semi-killed it for me. And I don't know quite what shifted. Is it some sort of a spiritual thing that's happening? Is it something else? I think one of my theories about it is that perhaps the mainstream fashion has been embracing some of this, especially with Wednesday, some of these darker styles, and people have more and more things with phases of moons in mainstream stores, and I've seen like all sorts of magical symbols, and tarot cards are quite in at the moment as well. So you even go to a mainstream store, and I think I have a video where I have a couple of bags like that, Ouija boards, and all of that is quite fashionable at the moment. So maybe the darker alternative fashion also had to go a bit more extreme to counter that it was, you know, being dragged into the overall mainstream fashion world. I don't know. I don't know if it was a rebellion of that, or is it some sort of a, I don't know, people going in droves to the Satanic temple. I don't know if it's actually connected to anything spiritual. I don't really have like a concrete opinion on that, because I don't know. So I thought I would also ask, you know, what is your opinion? What actually happened? Do you enjoy like some of these styles? What is your favorite, I guess, kind of symbol in dark fashion in general? Put your answers down below. I'd be really keen to read your opinion on the subject as to, you know, what actually happened. Maybe you have an answer that I don't have. So like I said before, not really here to like have a huge opinion on whether this is good, bad, or whatever, but just merely stating a fact, and it's definitely a fact. I mean, look at some of the stuff on the websites and just note how it's evolved. And I just wanted to sort of have a chat about that and see if anyone has any, you know, answers as to why. And yeah, basically that's pretty much all I had to say on it. So do let me know what your opinion is. I'd be super keen to find out. And I hope you have a pleasant time of day, and greetings and salutations too.